Hi, and welcome to a webinar on writing a great abstract for CANO 2013. I'm Sally Thorne, and I'm the Director at Large for Research on the board of CANO. I'm also a faculty member at UBC, and it's a thrill to be able to encourage you to submit an abstract so you get to be part of our next year's wonderful conference. I'm going to start off at the very beginning of what an abstract is and review some of the principles of why you write it, what happens to it, how it helps you get accepted into the conference. And I'll run through this quite quickly. But remember that the slides will be posted, so if any of you do want to go back and review them later, you can certainly do that. An abstract is a very brief synopsis of the presentation that you're hoping to be able to make at the conference. And it's supposed to be clear, concise, logical, a sales pitch for what's important, interesting, and new that you have to tell your colleagues at CANO. What's it for? Well, when the abstract is in, it helps the review committee select which are the presentations and posters that will make it onto the conference program, which are the ones that are successful, and which ones unfortunately won't be. Once they've made that decision, it also helps them organize the program. So there's some things they're going to need to know about the kind of presentation that you want to make and how it fits with others. The abstract is also the thing that will cause your colleagues, when they get to the conference, to look through the program and say, oh, I want to go to that one. So it's an invitation that encourages people to come to your particular session. And then for those who don't make it to your session, it might be a way of briefly describing your work. So it's got multiple purposes, and it's important to keep in mind those different audiences as you prepare your abstract. In thinking about an abstract, it's quite important to consider who you are at this stage of your career. The conference is encouraging people to present whether you're a student, a practicing nurse, a beginner in research, a seasoned researcher, wherever you are at your career in practice or scholarship or leadership, you want to be able to write an abstract that reflects what it is you know and what it is you want to contribute. So it is important to think about who you are. Are you a first-time attender? Is this your very first presentation? And what's your level of expertise? You don't want to overstate yourself as an expert if you're a beginner, but you want to be able to convey to your audience a little bit that will help them understand who you are and what they're going to learn by coming to your presentation. It's also worth doing a little reflection and saying, am I ready to write this abstract? Am I ready to present this work? Is this work that's completed, or is it just in the beginning formative stages? Sometimes if you haven't really thought it through and you haven't done the work yet, it's a bit premature to submit an abstract. If it's a study or an initiative, can you confidently predict what the conclusion is? Because most of the time, a completed work is preferred, although certainly work that is in progress is legitimate for submission, but especially if you have some sense of what the outcome is likely to be. Try and avoid promises you can't fulfill. And try and avoid vague comments like the results will be discussed. Try and think about what it is about this project that you can confidently tell us, and you will be able to confidently tell us, and write your abstract with that in mind. Well, what if you want to present, but you haven't really got an idea? Well, talk to your colleagues. Brainstorm what you do, what you know. Use the literature. Try and position your idea that's something that adds to what we already know. You might look through recent editions of the Canadian Oncology Nursing Journal, for example, for papers that are in your field and what they say are the important issues. You might be able to use that as a launching pad. And familiarize yourself with what's happened at past conferences. What's already been presented? What have your colleagues have been talking about? That can help you get some ideas as to what it is that you might be able to contribute that would be of interest to your colleagues. Then you want to align your ideas with the abstract categories. the call for abstracts indicates that it's looking for papers that fit into one of these categories. And so try and think about which category it would be. Is it clinical, a practicing nurse kind of presentation? Is it educational, something about models of care and leadership? Or is it a research study? Think about what format you'd like to present. Are you someone who's wanting to be there and be seen, but not yet sure you want to stand up in front of an audience? Well, the poster presentation may be the perfect one for you, a way of talking to people without having to stand up and make a speech. Or if you'd like to present it in a speech, you'll need to think about how long. There are some options in how long the session would be. Obviously, more of the papers will be accepted at the shorter time limit and fewer at the longer time limit. There are also, if you've got a comprehensive plan for an interactive kind of activity, you might want to put forward a proposal for a workshop. And again, there are lengths of time that you'll have to put forward. So decide on that format. Read the guide. It's really important to read the submission guide and understand all of the expectations before you submit. Now when you've got your idea in mind, structure that abstract. Make sure it makes clear what the problem or focus is, what's your design methods, scope of your project initiative, what is it you did or thought or developed, and to the extent that you can, what are the outcomes or implications or impact of the work, so that the abstract really does tell that story in a logical way. It's always a good idea to try and orient it to the conference theme. And this next year's conference theme is inspiration, innovation, and transformation. Probably anything that you've thought up fits somewhere within that set of words. Link it to the conference objectives, and you'll find those written in the call for abstracts. The conference is interested in creating dialogue on issues and inspiring nurses with new and innovative practices and findings, challenging nurses to examine what they're doing, and providing examples of nursing practice transformations and innovations. So thinking about that may help you write your abstract in such a way that the reviewers can see that it would fit with the theme of the conference and the objectives of the conference. Write it professionally. It's so important that it be written in a way that's clear, coherent, understandable, and interesting. And the real challenge is to get it under 230 words. You want to make it interesting. Absolutely don't simply list the topics that you're going to talk about. That tends to make for a very uninteresting abstract. But instead use a narrative form. Write it in such a way that you try and attract some excitement about your topic. Make sure you've captured the purpose and the content and the intended outcome in a way that isn't just technically correct, but writes it in an evocative way that attracts attention and seems interesting. Pay careful attention to logic, sentence structure, and use of terms. It may be subliminal, but if you've got too many typos or syntax problems in an abstract, it does convey the idea that your thoughts may not be fully developed yet. So do pay attention to the way in which it's written and the clarity of the sentence structure. Avoid the common errors, and these are some of them. One is trying to squeeze up in too much information. You certainly can't tell everything in a very short abstract of 230 words, or providing too little information so that a reviewer really doesn't quite understand what it is you are wanting to talk about, what the area of concern is. Sometimes people provide too much background and not enough specifics, or vice versa. Another error is weak or confusing expressions of ideas. If it's a non-traditional term or expression, make sure the reader can understand it. And in this slide, there's a reference that can help you think more deeply about presentation of an abstract if I haven't given you enough. Always pay attention to what the reviewers are looking for. Is it original, exciting, and interesting? The reviewers want this conference to be the best one yet, so they're going to be looking for abstracts that sound like they'll be very exciting presentations. They want it to be relevant to the conference theme. They want it to speak to the audience. Remember, this is primarily oncology nurses and nurses who have some connection with caring for cancer patients. That's the group you're speaking to. And does it sound scholarly or professional in the way in which you've articulated it? It's a competitive process. Not all of the abstracts will be accepted. So do try and make sure your abstract stands out. Then you submit them on the online system. And you've got the link for the system in the guide. And I'm going to walk you through that system just so you can see what happens when you get in there and just give you a few pointers to navigate that system. You won't find it terribly difficult, but it's worth having a little look before you go in. This is the login page, and you log in and create an account for yourself. It's not the same as your CANO account. It's a different system. And once you've logged in, it asks you a series of questions, and you move back and forth through that submission, answering each aspect as you go. As is quite typical, you can see that some of these have a little star beside them, and those are the questions that you must answer. Some of the other ones that don't have stars are optional. And the other thing to notice is that there's always a menu along the left. So this is the easiest way to go back and forth between sections if you want to go back to a section after you've moved forward. But it also, when you've successfully completed each section, it provides you a tick box, so you can just double check that you've been everywhere. Enter your data in all of the categories that are required. And in certain screens, you'll have options. I want to just point out where the editing options and the removing options are. This is in relation to adding different authors that have to be entered into the database itself. And if you want to edit or remove one that you've put in, this is how you do that. And after every screen, you'll notice at the bottom left hand, there's a continue button. This is where you click to actually save this material and then move on to the next. When you get to the abstract itself, this is where you submit your 230-word abstract. Now, I strongly suggest that you've already prepared it in word processing. You've carefully reviewed it. It's much easier to edit it and finalize it in your word processing program than it is in this database. And also word check it. Find out how many words it is. It's possible that your word counting system is just a little bit different than this abstract system, so you may find that there's a slight difference in how they're counting words, but it'll be pretty close. Once you have it in Word and you're sure that it's correct, you can cut and paste right into that box and then click Continue. If you haven't counted correctly and you go over the limit, it's going to tell you that you're over the limit. It's going to tell you how much you're over the limit as well. And it won't allow you, it doesn't give you that continue button. So you're kind of stuck. You do need to go back and revise. And then when you do fix it and get within the limit, it will then allow you to go back and you've got the option to continue. Then there's a set of additional questions. And these are questions with regard to how many abstracts, what language, what format, whether you want to be considered for certain awards, because there are certain groups that have donated awards for posters and that kind of thing, and if yours happens to be in the right category, you may qualify. So do review all of these questions, and you are required to answer all of them that have a star, and you'll need to answer them all before it will let you continue. You also need to indicate what category your presentation is. Now, don't worry too much about this, because some of you may well find that your presentation doesn't neatly fit into one category or another. It's a little bit of leadership and models of care, and it's a little bit clinical. You only get one choice, and you're answering this really to help the review process, so that reviewers who are familiar with research will review the research ones and vice versa. And this will also help a little bit for the committee when it's grouping the presentations and trying to sort out what goes where once it's chosen them. So not to worry if it doesn't quite fit. Just choose the one that works best for you. And then you're asked to provide a biography. Now, it gives you 100 words, but you may not want to use that. This biography is meant to be a very short biography, just something that an introducer could use to announce you when you come forward. If you write a long biography, it'll cut into your talking time. So I'd recommend one that's short and sweet. And continue. And when you get to this page, this is the final page, and it asks you to review your work. So you click for a printer-friendly version, and you have a very good look to see that you've submitted it. Now, something that may be different in this system from other systems is that you don't need to press a submit button. It's important to know that as you've been continuing, it's been saving it in the system. You can go back in and edit it any time up until the final due date. But when you get to this stage and you have reviewed your work and this button now is ticked, it has been submitted. If you change your mind and you decide you really didn't want to submit it, or you'd rather submit another one, don't forget to go in before the deadline and delete this submission. After the deadline, everything that's in will be considered. The deadline's March 8th, and I'd encourage you to give yourself lots of time. It's not really a complicated system once you get into it, but you don't want to leave yourself frantic at the last minute. And some final clarifications. Just so you know, once your affirmations and the title have been entered, the abstract record will be saved as soon as you push the continue button. And if you go over that word limit or omit any other required elements, it's going to give you an error message before it lets you go forward. So if it stopped you and you can't go forward, chances are there's something you need to fix. Remember to delete anything that you don't want to submit, draft versions or anything like that, and give yourself lots of time to play with the system. Before you conclude, it's not a bad idea to have somebody else critically review your abstract text. See if some other eagle eyes can spot something you didn't. Carefully proofread it yourself, and check that preview to make sure everything looks correct and your details are all accurate. That's all there is to it. You're ready to write an abstract? Good luck, and I really hope to see you in Vancouver.